Okay, thank you guys so much for joining today. My name is John LeBaron. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, and I'm excited to introduce everyone to today's webinar topic, accelerating your international presence. And the topic today and the focus today will be China. So thank you so much for everyone's time today. Again, my name is John LeBaron. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Pattern. We are joined today and thrilled to have with us Chris Vincent. He is our Chief International Officer. He joins us from London. And Desiree Wong as well. She's our Senior APAC Consultant, joining us from London as well. So without further ado, let's get kicked off. And as people try to join us further on, I think it'll be okay. As a quick reminder, this session is being recorded and will be sent out to all registrants and attendees following the webinar. If you have questions throughout, feel free to shoot them directly or drop them into the Q&A window below. And you can also you won't be able to chat, but you can also just add questions right directly within the chat as well, or within the Q&A. And I'll try to moderate the session and answer some of those questions as we go along. Before we turn it over to some of our guests to learn from them and kind of get down to the nitty gritty, I wanted to provide a little bit of an overview on where we stand and certainly make an introduction to Pattern for those of you that don't have much of familiarity with Pattern. So at a high level, Pattern is an e-commerce accelerator. We use technology and services to accelerate brands on global e-commerce platforms around the world, including marketplaces and direct-to-consumer websites. So in China specifically, we have 3 global offices, over 100 employees. We are a 5-star gold trade partner on Tmall and also operate on other marketplaces in the region, including Amazon Japan, Lazada, JD. And so really excited to be able to share our expertise and our passion for this region with you guys. As I mentioned before, we accelerate brands across marketplaces and D2C platforms. We have 18 global locations, including 6 distribution centers around the world. And our model is one of kind of a buy-sell relationship with most of our brands. And so we actually buy product from the brands we work with, and then we sell them on those marketplaces and operate everything that we do on the margin. So the reason why we've set up our company the way that we have is primarily a function of GMV across the world. So if you look at this map, some of these data points are a little outdated, but certainly directionally accurate. And as you can see, the United States, very robust GMV from an e-commerce perspective. So this would include all D2C sites. It would include marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart and eBay. It would also include e-tailers like Home Depot or Lowe's, etc. All transactions that are happening from an e-commerce perspective. And as we look at some of this, some of it's, you think of India as being this massive economy, and it is, and high population density area of the world, but compared to, Canada is still bigger from an e-commerce GMV perspective. And so some of these regions are very, very fast growing, but they're less mature. I think certainly, quote unquote, the elephant in the map is China right here at $2 trillion. China was the first developed country, or any country actually, to reach this pinnacle of more e-commerce sales than any other region, but also as a function of retail sales. So that's super interesting. 51% is the estimate this year of all retail transactions going through e-commerce in China this year. And so they're ahead of the curve, even in a post-COVID environment for some of these other countries like the United States. So certainly a massive opportunity. And we're going to walk through some of the ins and outs of being successful, tips and tricks, as well as what to avoid in the region. From a distribution perspective, from a marketing perspective, and certainly from a customer service perspective. So very excited to chat through this. Again, here are some of the brands that we represent across the world in varying capacities. Some of those are in the buy-sell model that I mentioned. Some of those are straight consulting relationships. But overall, we really love the partners that we work with. And a big part of our relationship with them is certainly going international and helping them understand everything from packaging to translation to rules and regulations to VAT taxes to export and import and everything in between. So certainly as you go along, as I mentioned before, please ask these panelists questions. Feel free to drop them a line. And if it's helpful after the webinar, we'd be happy to hop on a call and walk through your specific kind of aspects of it. So with that, why don't we kind of turn this over to Chris, Chief International Officer. Chris, you've spent a lot of your career in Southeast Asia, and I think are about to make a big move with your family down there for a second, third, fourth tour of duty. So why don't you tell us a little bit about growing demand for international brands, both maybe China as well as some of the rest of the world, and maybe highlight some of those differences that you've seen.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. So hi, everybody. I mean, I think that, we're focusing on China today, but, really this whole international thing has been really interesting over the last, let's say, 18 months with COVID. We've seen a real explosion of online everywhere, and some markets have overachieved versus others, and some markets are easier to achieve growth than others. I think certainly one of the things that we've seen from an international perspective is really the proliferation, I suppose, of online selling generally, but also the fact that distribution is such a massive play for brands when they're looking at, securing, I suppose, the right kind of growth. So what I mean by that is, generally the most successful and enduring brands are ones that control the amount of distribution that they have in markets and trying to funnel that towards more full price selling. And so if we just flip on to the next slide, John, I can talk a little bit more about China. I mean, specifically with China, it's a massive population, high internet penetration, a lot of shoppers using apps like WeChat. But I think the interesting piece around this is really how well China has weathered the COVID storm. So, some markets are winners, some markets are losers. I would definitely say that China has probably been better at locking down and tackling that quickly. And so a lot of brands have seen some pretty exponential growth in the last 18 months in terms of marketplace. And certainly it's been a lot more cohesive market from a continuity point of view than others. But I think one of the things that China has done really well is really target these international brands and make the shopping experience pretty easy. So the main 4 sites you would look at are Taobao. So JD is the one with the little dog there in the left-hand corner. And then you got Tmall, which is a subsidiary of Taobao. So Taobao is more of a C2C channel. Tmall is B2C. And then Pinduoduo is more of a multi-buy, maybe a discount-driven channel. But these are the 4 channels that really make up a large part of the ecosystem in China, and ones that you should be thinking about. We've had some brands engage us where they've had an exorbitant amount of sales coming through other channels outside of what we would call the main ones, which, from a Western brand perspective would be JD and Tmall. And then it begs the question, or you scratch your head and go, why is that? What's happening there? And really, for a lot of brands, and they're coming from Western markets, we would really, expect that the majority of your sales would come from number 2 and number 4, which are the, I guess, either cross-border or onshore models that we would use. So just focusing in a little bit on Tmall, I mean, it's the number 1, I guess, channel in China. It's got over 70,000 brands, 50,000 virtual stores. It's growing 20% in a space of 3 months from a GMV point of view. It's got almost 800 million active annual consumers. I mean, it's seen a huge proliferation of the brands growing there, but what does that tell you? I mean, there's a lot of competition on the channel. So you've got to be really careful about how you enter the market and what you do. I think I can't underestimate the point about making sure that you're going in there in the right way. We've, half of our business in China is rescuing brands that just have not succeeded. They're losing money, or they're not getting the kind of growth that they want. And it's really about a lack of visibility, lack of awareness. So again, just understanding that Tmall is the biggest channel, but there's a lot of competition there. So, you've got to really make sure you can elevate yourself and think about how you grow above the crowd.
Chris, maybe this would be a good time to just interject for a second. I mean, you're from Canada, right? And then spent a lot of time in the US, spent a lot of time in the UK. How, just as a Chinese consumer, and I think, Desiree will probably get into this at some point as well, so I look forward to hearing from her, but, what is just like the general vibe difference from an e-commerce perspective, maybe even from a mobile perspective? I think we're all kind of glued to our phones all the time, but maybe just a little bit, like how is everything different in China from an e-commerce perspective? I hear people ordering their breakfast on e-commerce. I mean, it's just like, it feels like it's just like a different world. And so for people who have not spent a lot of time there, maybe you could just paint us a picture of why. I mean, 800 million active users feels like it's like hard to even wrap your head around it, right? Because those numbers just get so big. But maybe you can help paint a picture a little bit for people on the call.
Yeah, so I might come at it more from a Western point of view, and again, some of the context I've had living internationally, and I'll let Desiree talk about it from a local point of view and how important some of this ecosystem is to day-to-day life, which we, when we think about from a Western perspective, is quite alien when you go over there, and also the speed at which innovation moves in the market, which is also a bit mind-boggling. Yeah, so I mean, I think the major difference in my mind, when you go in there, is just the reliance that, consumers have on apps. Now, that might not be generally different when you think about it from a macro point of view, when we talk about Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, all these kind of things. But WeChat is one of the biggest apps in the market. People rely on this day to day doing transactions. People are scanning QR codes, which is starting to get used a little bit more in the West, but has been there for years in China. Anything from augmented reality to, purchasing, to getting people's cards, all these kind of things. But I suppose the major difference is this whole cashless society that we've started to move towards in China, and the fact that you can just literally purchase everything on a smartphone. And I think the other really major difference in China, from my perspective, and I've been going back and forth to China for almost over 20 years now, is this whole idea of the mistrust of what's real and what's not real. And we really take that for granted in places like Canada, the States, and Europe. I mean, you can get fake eggs in China for cheaper than you can buy real eggs. And so there's this whole concept of, is this product real or is it not real? And so this concept of, and I think we'll talk a little bit about this later, but this Tmall Global and JD Global establishing these ecosystems to have the brands and a legitimate channel for Chinese consumers to buy what they believe is real overseas product. And, while we in the West look at a lot of stuff we buy and it says made in China, that's really a bad thing in China. Chinese people don't like to buy things made in China because there's there is a sense that, is it real? Like, am I getting what I'm actually paying for? Is somebody, taking advantage of me? So I think don't underestimate the value in legitimate sales and how important that is to the Chinese consumer when they're buying something. And they very much will pay over the odds for what is considered quote unquote real. Desiree, what else do you want to add into that?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Desiree here. Chris shared very real insight of what's going on in China right now. Actually, because I was from Hong Kong, so when I visited China frequently throughout the year, I can see how much more weird I became when I pay with cash. All the staff, they look at me like I am an alien, and they need to find so many people to get me the changes. So now I learned I don't use the cash anymore. I need to use WeChat Pay or Alipay. And about the trust to the brands, or trust about whether they get the genuine products, we have a really interesting example, because for us, it's very straightforward that if I'm going to purchase from a flagship store, then all the products are from that brand. But we constantly receive customers' inquiries asking, are you really the true flagship store? How can you prove yourself? How can you prove you are the representative of the brand? We always need to get more authorization letter even, to show the customers that we are the representative of the brand. So this kind of communication for international brands, they would not think about it beforehand, or they will find it really strange. Another example is that we will go into the details about this, but they really like the interaction with the brands or with the stores by having customer service agents through live chat. They ask different kinds of questions. One very interesting question recently is that we help a brand to sell the food supplement products, and they ask our live chat customer service agents and say, can I take food supplements and then drink a cup of coffee? For the international brands, or for my contacts from the brands, they don't understand why there's such question. But once you understand how they create this question, then you realize what you need to do. The reason they ask this question is they thought food supplements is a kind of medicine. So they think that you shouldn't take medicine with coffee. So you shouldn't take food supplements with coffee as well. This gave the brand such a good lesson to show how food supplements is different from medicine. So this kind of local knowledge or day-to-day interaction with the true customers help both us and the brands a lot on how to trade in the country.
Great.
Super fascinating. I appreciate you guys weighing in on this. We've got a couple of questions that have come up regarding our model specifically. I want to be able to get through some of these other questions around just marketplaces as a whole, and then maybe when we get into, what Pattern can do or what other, trading partners will do for brands, maybe we can address those questions. But I will use the time to encourage other people who are on the call to be able to ask questions. I promise I'll get to those, get you some good answers. But if you want to queue them up, that's fabulous as well. So Chris, let's go on and go a little bit deeper into some of these other marketplaces that are here.
Yeah, so I think I talked about this point before, but Tmall, JD, especially the Tmall Global, JD Global, have really made the ecosystem super easy for Western brands to operate on. Again, whether your brand is going to be successful in China and how you do that is a separate question. But what they've really done is try to, especially with the global selling side, they've really tried to make it super simple for people to transact with Chinese consumers. We go on to the next slide. It just gives you a little bit of a breakdown around how we think of this. So Tmall.com is the main onshore, what we call mainland site, local selling. This is for people who have product registration, can get their products into China and can target mainland customers inside China. Very quick delivery time. And the key thing here is you have your trademark registered and the products are registered. When we look at the right-hand column, this is what we call Tmall Global. JD Global is the same thing, depending on what your product is. They're based out of Hong Kong. They target consumers in mainland China. The tax and legal entity, as well as the product registration and the corporate bank account, they're all located outside China. With the registration, it's not required. So this is a great cross-border model. Some of you, if you've been involved in registration in China, can be a quite long and onerous process. And the warehousing is bonded inside China or located in one of our facilities, or in fact, depending on who you're working with, located outside China. We would always recommend putting it near shore as opposed to trying to ship stuff from the US. It's just not possible or not really feasible from a conversion point of view. The trademark is not registered. Again, in China, it doesn't need to be, but we'd highly recommend anyone who's doing work in China to have their trademark registered. This is a big, watch out for brands that are transacting in China. The key thing, if we think about US, it's MAP. In Europe, it's selected distribution. In China, it's the first to trademark rule. So if you don't have your brand trademarked in China, if you're doing even a little bit of business or considering doing business there, I'd highly recommend starting that trademark process. And then, obviously shipment and delivery, as we talked about, well, we expect near shore is the best model. We have all of our locations either in Hong Kong or bonded within China to drive that, quick customer experience. The further away you are, the less compelling the offer is, and you'll find the traction that you get in the market will be less. So if we look at, I guess the differences, so we're trying to compare this back to Amazon. A lot of people in the West, we all think about Amazon as being the big beast. As John showed us earlier, Tmall is a big player, but call out here is, fees as a percentage of sales is definitely lower. I think the point here is that, there's other costs that can ramp up pretty quickly when you're working in the Tmall or JD or China ecosystem that you got to be really aware of that can build up quite rapidly. But this gives you I guess a view of how it works and the costs associated with doing business. If you do it right in China, you can generally sell lower cost product in a more economical way than you could on Amazon and any of the Western markets. But it's really about making sure you tweak that. One of the questions I think was about, a view on how, we set it up and the awareness piece. I think, if it's a standing start in a market, we're talking about probably 25% of sales. And generally speaking, Tmall is very picky about who they allow on the platform now because they've got so many brands. They're really looking at almost moving to an invite, approach. So we as Pattern have some pull with the brand, Tmall, so we can get you onto the marketplaces there. But generally speaking, you're looking at about 10 million renminbi a year in terms of annual turnover to kind of jump in on the marketplace. I guess depending on the conversion rate, you're looking at around $1.5 million USD from your first year. Most brands with a 25% marketing spend can jump in on that. So it's not unfeasible. The market is very large, but remember, again, you've got to get, whether you work with Pattern or you're working with someone else, you just need to make sure you have visibility and eyes on what the fees are, and the model should work. So one of the things that I think makes us quite a bit different than your average TP or trade partner, this is your third-party seller in China, this is what we call them in the China ecosystem, is that we really bring a Western trade mentality with a strong understanding of Eastern culture. So we're talking a lot about China, but China's one market in a very big population center in Southeast Asia. I think it's really important that you get a brand or a business that can work with you that understands the region, not just China. And we've spent a lot of time, I suppose, in the market, learning about the market, living and breathing it, boots on the ground, as we say. And this allows our local team to support Western brands like no other. So we can scale brands quickly in China, but we can also talk your language. I mean, part of the reason that we got involved in China way back in the day was we just felt that there was a major gap in terms of the language that people were speaking onshore. And I'm not just talking about Chinese to English, but just the trade aesthetic and the way they approached things versus what Western brands were looking to see. So visibility, awareness, all these kind of things that we bring to the mix, it really helps the ecosystem fly. So, I won't go through all of these, but there's a certain number of challenges that brands face. And I think understanding the China ecosystem, a lot of it comes down to the tyranny of time and distance, like how far are you away from the market, and the visibility that you have on what's going in. So what does good look like? And so you can raise those in 4 different categories: commercials, logistics, resource, and account management. But I think that lack of visibility, I think the lack of awareness and what good looks like in the market versus your competitive set or versus what you could be doing on your own is really, really important. And I think the other thing is of course, China is, from a Western perspective, fairly complex and different. But also, there's some basic, what I would call building blocks around trade that are really important that sometimes get overlooked just because people get too fixated on the culture. So, the content, the copy, all the stuff that you would look at and really obsess about in the Amazon world, I would just ask you to make sure you're doing the same in the Tmall, JD, China world or Asia world, because it really is the same kind of thing. Again, what we would help bring is, I guess, that context about what good looks like, but really important that you're thinking about all these things. And I think if you look at one of these categories, and I think we're going to distribute the presentation to you after, but if you find something in these categories, if you find like 4 or 5 points you're not sure that's happening properly in the market, and again, China is a big place about price erosion as well, then I think you really should be asking the question is, do I have the right partner working with us, or are my team capable of doing what we expect them to do in the local market?
I think it's really great, Chris. Maybe before we turn it over to Desiree to really get into the kind of real tips and tactical points of successfully launching, we can address these 2 questions here. So the first one, for China, I'm guessing, I'm trying to read between the lines, somewhat abbreviated, but we're selling on 4 channels under our brand. Will Pattern handle legal issues, logistics, storage, last mile delivery, returns? And so maybe let's ask, that's kind of a 2-part question. Maybe just you can answer that first section there.
Yeah, so I mean, we have an all-in model like we do in all of our markets. We'll handle, I guess, the soup to nuts kind of approach to the market. Hands in the air, I'm not a lawyer. Our team aren't lawyers, but we certainly will raise compliance issues or gray or fake sellers in the market. We work very closely with brands on this. I mean, as a full price seller in markets, this is an issue that's near and dear to our hearts. So really important that we're helping close down the market and giving you guys really the visibility that you need in order to take those decisions. Logistics, storage, all these kind of things, again, is managed as part of that, all-in model. We tend to, in China, because of the speed to market and what consumers are looking for there, we tend to outsource a lot of the logistics to Tmall or JD specifically, depending on what marketplace we're looking at. But I think in terms of our approach, again, think of it as, we'll buy the product off you, we'll represent you in the market at that full price model, give you the visibility, and all you guys need to do really is, liaise with us in terms of the brand positioning, changes, things that we need to know about, and also make sure that we're giving you the visibility back that you need in order to take decisions strategically for your brand.
Yeah, maybe I'll just piggyback on that a little bit. I would say almost everything related to the marketplace. There's not as much of an enforcement mechanism like map pricing and even selective distribution to some level. That's handled, to Desiree's earlier point, like if you actually manage the Tmall Global store, you get a lot of quote unquote, what would be, akin to buy box control just by actively managing that store. It's not as much of eliminating a bunch of gray market sellers. So the other piece is there could be considerable legal effort involved with getting your trademarks, especially if you've got squatters or people who have come in. That's not something normally that falls under our buy-sell model, but to Chris's point, we would certainly advise on that and connect brands to that piece. The second part of that question is, will we have access to the buyer's list for marketing purposes, and are the risks of business conduct taken by Pattern? So Chris, maybe you can speak to that second aspect a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, any information. So CRM is actually a real thing in China. We can get information in terms of, who's purchasing the product more than you can with Amazon. So whatever we get, we'll pass on to you. Now, it may not be the full kind of detailed customer information, but I think it's decent, and it allows you, again, with the CRM program, which we would run in market, allows you to be able to remarket to those consumers. Again, from a business risk point of view, we're the brand enabler, we're not the brand. So if something was to go wrong, if I'm reading the question right here, like business conduct, of course, we're all above board in everything we do in terms of operation. And we're fully legal in the country, so we don't take risks, we don't cut corners. But if something was to happen with a product specifically, if you're an ingestible or a topical that causes some kind of problem medically, then it's the brand that's responsible ultimately for that. We're not responsible. Obviously, we would feed that back to the brand, make sure that we're taking appropriate action with the consumer, make sure we minimize any impact to the market, but ultimately the brand is responsible for that. We would, again, be your conduit and your execution entity onshore.
Yeah, and maybe just the last, but I don't know if we want to chat about this, over a webinar or not. We could probably take it offline and chat if you have specific questions. But there are certain business conduct practices, anti-corruption, bribery, all those sorts of areas that are certainly, top of mind, especially if there's a US brand that has local offices. I mean, things can get into a tailspin fairly quickly. So again, I would just raise that as a point of, you definitely want to be thinking about it. You definitely want to have a contingency plans in place, and you definitely want to have visibility as to what's happening with your local offices to ensure that you're not exposed to liability because of some of those aspects that might be happening under that purview. So anything to add to that, Chris?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, we're pretty upfront about all these things. Our job is to give visibility and to support. We certainly, again, follow the rules in all the markets that we work in. Again, I think it's important that, again, we're a US entity. We have entities in different parts of the world, but really important that we're above board in all the activities that we do. And that visibility piece is super important around that. And of course, if brands want more support in a market, we can certainly connect them in with different players that we have come across over the years around compliance, around legal, and we can really support a brand from that perspective. But again, hands in the air, I'm not a lawyer. We're just trying to do the right thing by the brand, and we take advice from the experts on these things.
Yeah. Okay, so second question again, and we'll turn it over to you, Desiree, because I know we're about the bottom of the hour, about halfway through the webinar here, and got a lot still to cover. But question that came from an attendee was, what's the minimum value startup GMV stock commitment required to start up in China via Pattern? We do 5 million on Amazon and 20 million via our own website online. So maybe just, I mean, you could even back up for a little bit of context versus this specific one. How do we evaluate brands that are a good fit? And what are kind of the investment levels, not just from a stock perspective, but from a overall commitment level going into China?
Sure, it's a really good question, because a lot of brands, maybe they are huge in the Western world and they would be really confident that then should be no problem for me to enter new markets, even though it's the other side of the planet. But we are going to share with you some information on how we can assess whether the brand is ready to launch immediately in China through Tmall, or is there anything that the brand needs to do before, at least 1 year before the official launch. So we have prepared exactly those slides to answer this question. Shall I just go into the details on?
Take it away. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to share with you how a brand can have a successful launch on Tmall Global. Actually, on this slide, you can see that Tmall right now has so many international brands. Even the luxury brands like Burberry opened its own flagship store already. Timor isn't just looking at how much the sales or the commission the brands can bring to the platform. They are looking for more, especially on how the brands can provide a above standard user experience to its customers, because Chinese customers, they are becoming even more demanding. What Tmall wants the brands to offer are to have new customers to its marketplaces through the out-channel marketing, like from the social media. They want the brands to help increasing the average spend of each user. And finally, one thing that some brands might neglect is how to maintain a high DSR score. So DSR score means the detailed seller rating. It includes 3 main aspects, which are whether your content is accurate. That means whether all the product description you mentioned or the product videos are exactly the same. Is it the true of what the customers can receive? The second aspect is about the customer service attitude, because actually in China or on Timor JD, almost 80% of the customers would interact with a brand or a merchant's customer service agents, no matter before or after they've placed an order, because they value the recommendation from the customer service agent, they value the interaction, or sometimes they just want to ask how to use that product after they purchase after they place an order. So the second aspect is about whether your customer service agent's attitudes are nice enough. And finally, it's about delivery. For the Chinese customers, next day delivery is almost like a standard, and they even demand maybe 3 hours delivery within the same day. So these 3 aspects are really important for brands to consider, except from just looking into the sales. And when you are going to launch your brand, your Tmall store, actually there are plenty of data available in the backend system to help you come up with the successful strategies, I would say. So all this data are available in the backend system. I know that some trade partners, they choose not to share all, because actually the data can show you whether they are doing a good job or whether you have enough insight to improve the store and work with the brands. And normally we will have a launch strategy for the brand. If they're ready to launch immediately, we will have the soft launch in 1 month and then grand launch immediately. But if the brand is not ready, we can have different pre-launch strategies that I'm going to show you later. After the launch, we will then set up the growth strategy with maybe how we keep up our DSR score, how we interact with customers through the platform, through customer service agents, and finally is the route to profitability. Because at first, especially for brands that might not have enough brand awareness, we recommend brands to spend at least 25 to 30% of their annual GMV on marketing, both on platform and off platform. Then how would you decrease the cost throughout the years and then become even more profitable? That would be a key issue that we are helping with a lot of brands.
So a couple of things that you need to think about when you're considering launching in China is, what's happening with the Daigao or the C2C sellers. These are people that shop internationally, bring the product onshore in China. What's happening on WeChat, some of the social channels. Baidu is the Google equivalent in China. So can your brands be found there? Can it be found on the main channels? Like, when we're talking about Taobao generally, who's selling them? And then when we talk about the social media buzz, what's happening? How many fans do you have without actually being onshore? Are people talking about you on Weibo, Little Red Book? We also mentioned, WeChat earlier. If you just jump the slide, John, I'll go through this quickly. But, when you start talking about your brand, is it right to launch on Tmall Global if you don't have that onshore registration? How big is the market opportunity and how intense is the competition? We kind of talked around this a little bit earlier. We can help you kind of, ground that out to figure out if your brand is a high risk or a low risk launch. Tmall does these days, and I mentioned again this earlier, they like to curate the brands they bring on board. They're a little bit more picky than say they were 5 years ago, but do you have that awareness either through, the Daigaos or C2C sellers? What are you doing on all these platforms? How can you build a case? And again, working with a brand like Pattern, helps your business case because we have relationships with inside these, and some brands are just generally big enough that they can just jump right on. Tmall, JD are great, happy to have them. And then I think it's about demand generation. How much are you willing to invest to get that kind of result on the channel? So again, I talked about 25% before. We've put a range here, 20 to 30%, but this is really important to try to drive that awareness and compete in a very, very busy market.
Yeah, so maybe this is a good spot to just take a breather for a second and answer some of these questions too. So that first question we chatted about, or I guess it's probably more the second one, is, hey, I'm doing 5 million on Amazon, I'm doing 20 million on my website. Is this enough to kind of get interest? I think to your point, Desiree, it's more complicated than that. It's just like, let's evaluate a bunch of different aspects of this, particularly, who would be your primary competitors? Is there already a market here? Is there any awareness of your brand? How much needs to be created organically? All those questions. So maybe that's a follow-up. I guess the specific answer to that question is, yeah, absolutely. Give us a call afterwards, shoot us an email. Let's take a look at your brand specifically, and we'll run this analysis basically for free to give you a sense of, hey, we think this could be a go, or you're probably going to need to do a little bit more organic work before you launch on a marketplace. The second one is, which category of consumer products from the US basically are relevant to the Chinese consumer? What about small US centric brands, niche products, luxury products, and the packaging? Can we keep the USA look and feel, or does it need to be done to be more China centric? I mean, it's a big question, but maybe Desiree, if you want to take a stab at answering that one, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's a really good question about whether you need to redo your product packaging or even the logo or your product name to become more China-centric. I would recommend that if your brand name is too difficult to pronounce or spell in English, then definitely a Chinese nickname or a Chinese brand name would help. Especially Chinese customers, they like to create a nickname for your hero products. That's how they do. There is because I'm from the beauty industry, so I know about it, that a black bottle serum from L'Oreal, actually in China, the customers call it the little black bottle in Chinese. That's how they like to nickname the hero products. And this is also how the brands should capture this opportunity to make it viral. However, for the brand look and feel or the product packaging, I would recommend to keep it as the original packaging or original style, because customers actually, they value your foreign look and feel. That's why they want to purchase your products. If they like something really Chinese, they would look for the local branded products which sell maybe just 1/10 of the pricing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, maybe you can keep going here then, Desiree, and kind of walk through a little bit around key criteria for success.
Sure. So if after you've done some like pre-qualification and think, oh, okay, I'm good to go, I'm good to launch on Tmall, then I will recommend 3 tips for you when you have, if you want to have a successful launch. The first one is definitely the hygienic factors. You need to have your storefront and product pages ready. On Timor JD, customers are very demanding in terms of the content. Actually, images are basic, but videos for them are also basic. So you need to have product videos, or even a videos with model talking about the selling points of your product ready on your product detail page. And they expect every product detail page involves something like A+ content on Amazon already. You need to have your FAQs ready. You need to have your customer service agents well prepared to answer all the interesting questions from the Chinese customers. The second tip is to have your marketing plan and budget ready. I'm going to show you more example of what kind of marketing activities that we recommend a brand need to have when they launch, but you have to allocate a budget well, both on platform and off platform. For on platform, this is helping the brand to acquire the traffic within the platform, but you also need to build up your brand awareness, brand image, to have your brand story conveying to the Chinese customers on the social media platform. And finally, be agile, because Chinese e-commerce environment is ever changing. The regulation or how the trend changes almost every day. So maybe what you planned ahead might not be successful once you implement it, but as long as you have the agility to change the way or get the local knowledge, local insights, you can have your plan changes quite quickly. And this is also something amazing trading in China, because if you don't success today, you might be successful tomorrow. But what if you do not have any brand awareness in China? It's not the end of the world for you. We recommend that there can be 3 ways that you can build up your brand awareness before applying a Tmall Global store. The first one is, if you haven't, please set up your official accounts on the key social media platforms, including WeChat, Weibo, Little Red Book, because Tmall category managers from Tmall and JD, they will search your brand like what we did on the social media platform and see whether there are already some influencers or some customers talking about your brand. That's why it also links to the second tip here, is to work with influencers to create a digital word of mouth, because more the customers or more influencers talk about your brand, that means more product listing we can see in the China environment. And the third tip is, if you really want to start right away, you can consider the multi-branded stores, because on the platforms, we can see some companies, they help brands to launch in China through their own multi-branded store. Of course, they might require you to support in terms of content or even marketing, but they might have some, at least you might be able to start selling right away and see whether you can get some traction from their brand multi-branded stores. And I can quickly show you an example how we help the UK top 1 food supplements retail store to launch on Timor, which is Holland & Barrett. So actually Holland & Barrett, they launched in China through several platforms or through different partners several years ago. And the pricing or the branding were not represented very well or very aligned because of the different partners. We ran several workshops with their key stakeholders to understand their vision, their current business setup, and then we established a 3-year plan for them, so that right now they have an official flagship store on Tmall Global, and they also successfully aroused some interest from Tmall to really get like exclusive supports on getting more traffic, or some push on which KOLs or which celebrities we can work with. So it's a really good examples of some brands they might fail several times already in launching in China, but it's not the end of the world. We can try to help on by defining the strategic approach.
Awesome. So Desiree, we have about 13 minutes left. I know there's a lot to get through on the marketing campaigns. Maybe you could walk us through a little bit around, if they don't redo their name or their packaging, what at least are they doing from an imagery and a content and an advertising perspective on these marketplaces?
Yeah, sure. So actually I'm going to show you here that how Tmall is changing in terms of what they're looking for. Actually, content and customer interaction become the top two aspects that they're looking for. On this slide, you can see that before there's something called Weitao, but now it's renamed into subscription, that Tmall wants the brands to interact with their customers on this like social media like elements within the platform, so the brands can announce the new product launches, interact with customers to share the user-generated content. And this is a very good example that how Timor wants to have the traffic within the platform, that they don't let anyone leave the platform and complete the purchase. And this slice is also something very new, Kuang Kuang. So actually Kuang Kuang is, it means shop around in English. It has replaced the Weitao on the Taobao homepage or the sticky bottom menu. It's almost like a TikTok element within the platform. It needs the brands to create a lot of content. Almost every day you need to have new content featuring different products, but you need to have real lifestyle videos, but not hard selling. So it's quite a new challenge for a lot of brands, how they learned on creating new content every day, work with really local agencies, getting local models to talk about your products, having product placement in the lifestyle videos. And the last tips about trading on Tmall, doing marketing on Tmall is, of course, live streaming. So live streaming is becoming even more mature. It's not just about having like a sales peak in 10 minutes. It's more about how you interact with customers. So there are two types of live streaming. One is through influencers or celebrities with the purpose of sales peak. Another one is to have daily live streaming, like 3 hours live streaming from your store every day to just interact with your brands. So this kind of ever-changing trend will differentiate whether you be successful or not. And here's an example of our brand, one of our brands, Fawn. Actually, we have our daily 3-hour live streaming during COVID because a lot of customers at that time, they realized that, oh, I needed to take some food supplement to maintain my immunity or my health. So because of this initiative, actually, we can see a doubling of the sales in just 1 month because of the interaction. So this is a really good example to show how live streaming or how one activity can serve different kinds of purpose and then finally still give you a good revenue.
Oh, this is amazing, Desiree. Thanks for taking us through. So a lot of what you've shared is obviously on platform, and maybe I'll use this time again to just 10-minute countdown for people on the webinar. If you have additional questions, feel free to push them through. We've got some experts here to answer those. So a lot of what you chatted about is on platform. Talk to us a little bit about off-platform advertising and what's happening off the marketplace to drive demand on the marketplaces, and some of the tips there.
Yeah, there are several off-platform social media platforms that I would ask the brand don't miss. The first one would definitely be Weibo. So actually Weibo is still, it has dropped a little bit when WeChat first launched several years ago, but right now WeChat has become a daily app for Chinese consumers to maybe interact with friends, to read the news. But for marketing purpose, actually Weibo is still one of the top platforms that the brand needs to do. Actually, Weibo offers a really good function that you can link your product detail page, product pages from Timor into your Weibo social media account. So the customers can just press immediately if they got influenced by your organic content and complete the transaction within the Weibo stores, what I say. But actually, the whole transaction on the system level is still happening on your Tmall store. So that's a really good function. And the second platform is Little Red Book, or what we call 小红书 in Mandarin. So this is a very Instagram style ad that targets mainly women, young women with urban females that they like to explore more international brands, mainly on fashion, beauty, health. So a lot of customers, they like to read all the influencers' content from this platform. And although you can see that only 8% of the users will convert immediately after they read the reviews, but actually this is a very strong platform to build your brand awareness, and we can see quite a lot of traffic after they view the content on this platform would convert on Tmall. They will let us know that actually I'm coming from 小红书after reading certain KOL's recommendation. And another platform is also very hot in the Western world as well. So Douyin is the Chinese version of TikTok. But what we need to be aware of is, because this platform focuses a lot about hilarious or funny videos, whether your brand is suitable on this platform you need to be really careful, because if your brand is premium, or if your brand is a more like serious style, whether this platform is suitable is something that the brand needs to look into. And the next platform is Bilibili. Is also quite a new platform. So it's almost like a YouTube platform in China. The influencers on this platform, they tend to have really high engagement rates with their followers. And we can see quite a lot of traction of even immediate sales once we have launched a product placement videos on this platform. And finally, is about the offline environment, because when you launch on Tmall and you have done quite a lot of like digital marketing, actually don't underestimate that some customers, they still like to have a physical experience with your brands, or to get some recommendation from some like agency. So we tend to have collaborate with some institutions, for example, like for Thorn's case, because this is a food supplement brand, we collaborate with the health management institutions based in China in the top tier cities. So we can get the recommendation from the professionals working in the institutions, and then they can place orders through our Tmall store. So it's almost like a offline to online experience, even though your brand hasn't had an onshore entity yet.
Amazing. Well, Desiree, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge on these platforms, and certainly on the off-marketplace platforms as well. I think the main takeaway for me is you definitely need a team to help accomplish. You cannot stick your toe in the water and be successful. You've got to have the backup of customer service, of marketing on platform, of marketing off platform. I mean, 3 hours a day of live streaming alone feels so overwhelming, but excited to see what the team is doing out here. So maybe we can walk through, we got about 5-6 minutes left, Chris, and you can just walk through a little bit of how to think through, the cadence.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. So, I mean, I'll take you through this pretty quickly. A lot of people focus in on Singles Day, which is 11/11 or November 11th in the trading calendar. You can see a big spike there. But in fact, we have a couple other festivals within the mix here, the biggest being 6/18 behind that. If you go on to the next slide, John, we can talk through some of those festivals directly. Okay, we've got Chinese New Year, which happens at various different times depending on the lunar cycle. But this year is the 24th to 30th of January. We've got Queen's Day, which is 3/8 or the 8th of March, 6/18 festival, National Day, which is in early October, and then Double 11 or Singles Day, as it's called. I mean, they each have different kind of activations going on. Promotions run usually for 1 to 2 months before we run up to CNY or Chinese New Year. and before the Spring Golden Week holiday. Queen's Day is promotions and gifts, self-gifting for women to celebrate International Women's Day, so they call it Queen's Day. The 618 festival is really a strong indicator in terms of what your performance is going to be in Double 11, but we've just come through a great 618 festival for our brands. National Day is, what we call Autumn Golden Week. It's small offers, again, not deep discounting, and something that we really try and avoid. A Double 11 is really a must for the market in terms of participation. That doesn't mean heavy discounting, but that means targeted discounting for your brand or promotional activity for your brand to achieve growth. We've seen a lot of brands that do heavy discounting on Double 11, and it really doesn't give you anything other than high returns. So just be aware of that there is an element required in that, but really important that you understand the strategy behind these events before you actually participate in them. So how do you find the right trade partner for you? We've been doing this for a long time. I think we've talked a lot about some of these, concepts, but, visibility is super important. Make sure that you have access to the data, comparatives to others in your category, how you're performing year on year, really an understanding of if you're not performing, why aren't you performing? Ensure your trade partner understands your category. I think trade partners will say they're good at every different brand. So traditional TPs, you have to understand how they built up the ecosystem. A lot of TPs have been created out of actually working in Tmall or JD in a specific category, and then they go off and start their own trade partner. So when you're working with a more traditional company inside China and they're focused just on China, you tend to find that they're good at one category or one specific area as opposed to lots of different areas. So something just to be aware of if you already have a traditional trade partner in there. Also, again, trade partners have their strengths and weaknesses. We found a lot of trade partners that either are good at on or are good at off platform. Sometimes they're just good at the trade piece and marketing is not great for them. So really, again, when you're thinking about your business and what's happening there, take an honest look at, is the marketing side of your business really flying? And do you feel like you're getting the optimal bang for your buck there? And then, think about what else you can be trading on. So we talked a lot about many of the sales coming from JD and Tmall, but there's a plethora of other channels that you can sell and get some really good traction for your brand off of. How well does your trade partner know those channels? How well does it function on them? And do you think that they're really going to be able to take you to that next level, or do you understand it yourself? So those are four of the questions that we ask, and making sure that we're getting the right result from your trade partners. So again, we talk about the skills required to drive e-com. This is not specific to China. This is generally what we think of as a mud map of the skills required to drive your business. So I won't go through each of the different parts here, but again, I would really encourage you to make sure you're thinking about all these pieces in your China business and making sure that you're getting, the output that you need. One call that I will make on here is customer service, which is super important for the China ecosystem. Depending on your brand, it can be between 75 and 90% of all transactions will go through the customer service function, whether they want to, as Desiree mentioned earlier, they want to understand if you're a real person, a real business, all the way through to, can you help me? I want to buy the product. I'm just not sure. So, we talked about this before, I think with one of the questions, but, the effective way to creating a China business plan is sizing the market opportunity, determining which sales channels are right for your brand. And again, no brainer that probably Tmall or JD or both might be the right first places to start, but what else is in there? And then defining the cost of doing business to make sure it's a profitable venture. There's a lot of businesses that we've worked with that are in China losing money, but they feel like they have to be there because there's an opportunity. For me, it's really about anyone going into China. There is absolute scope for you to make money in that market. It's certainly, if we're working with you, you will. We'll be honest with you if we don't think you can make money, because not every brand is a perfect fit for that market. But certainly, if we do an assessment and we say you can make money, you definitely will make money off of that.
Yeah, and this is just some screen captures from the Tmall backend system. We normally just give out the login to our brands so they can see transparent with complete transparency how well we are doing in terms of different key indicators. Actually, Tmall, they offer over 200 key indicators at the backend system. So all data available, you can even see how well you're doing compared to your direct competitors in the same categories.
Excellent. Well, Chris, maybe we'll just launch this very last slide and close it out here for us. And I know we've got one other question I wanted to get a chance to answer as well. So
yeah, so when we think about this, again, think about what you need to do pre-launch. When you launch, you need to drive awareness. You need to have the right marketing, the right strategy, and most importantly, you need to be working with the right partners in the ecosystem. If you don't speak Chinese and you don't read Chinese and you're not familiar with the market, you really need a partner that is and that you can trust to be able to interpret what's happening there to make sure that you're maximizing your opportunity.
Excellent. Quick question, and then we'll wrap it up. Do you need specific China approvals for consumer products for health and safety, et cetera, or will US approvals work?
So if you're doing cross-border, you don't need any of that local regulatory. If you're doing onshore, there is a different regulatory process that you need to go through. I mean, we can help you assess what that would be, but largely speaking, if you're doing a cross-border model, you can just hit the market directly.
Excellent. All right. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone again for coming today. Recording will be sent out. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us a line. My email is john@pattern.com. And again, wanted to thank Chris and Desiree for joining us today, and we will certainly catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much. Have a good one.